Hi everyone, this is Natalie, and this is my reply post for Module 3. I enjoyed listening to everyone's video response. I feel like an overall theme was that everyone identified their own biases, their own experiences and perspectives that may have influenced their lens through which they viewed this week's readings, because I do think that this week's readings were very personal, and that it is important we as people in the education field are able to recognize our own biases and how they may influence our work. And so I thought that was an overall theme. And so I'll start with Sarah. And you said that we should include work from multiple religious traditions, and that you're coming from an English teacher background. And I appreciate that, because I am an instructor at the community college. And so I do think that it's important whenever we teach to try to be as comprehensive and culturally competent, whether it be religious, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, anything, class, that we try to be comprehensive in our efforts of including works from multiple and varying backgrounds and influences. I do think that it is a very conscious effort that we have to make, and you pointed that out. It's not something that comes naturally, and so we have to really work at doing that as educators or individuals working in the education field. So it is a conscious effort. And then you also spoke to developing a curriculum for the students, and I think this is very important. A lot of times we look at what has already been developed for us to deliver to our students, or we have a set plan in mind for what we want to deliver to the students. But really what should happen is, and what's appropriate is, starting with the student. Where are they at? What do they need? What do they hope to learn from the course? And then developing the curriculum for them. And it helps to give, when we include multiple influences in our teaching that show diversity and beliefs in whatever, it gives value to the student. They're able to identify, and I think it helps to make some really meaningful connections for those students. And then you did mention recognizing our own perspectives before we go in there. To teach something, it's very important that we know where we stand, and keep that in check. So thank you for sharing that. Matthew, I like how you started with yourself and let us know right up front that, hey, here's what's happened in my life and here's what I believe. And so when I read this, it may have came from a different viewpoint than yours, and that's okay. So we have to start with ourselves. And then you mentioned Christian dominance, and pointed to some quotes from the text on that, and I think that is something that's very prevalent in the United States, that there is that sense of Christian dominance. And even though the Christian faith and religion, those involved, may not notice that, or may not even believe it, I do think that there is a sense of Christian dominance in the United States. And then marginalization, you talked about that when you were talking about the crossroads of religion and sexuality, and so those who don't conform get marginalized. They get pushed out to the margin. And I think that that's very very real today as well. If you've turned on a television or been standing in a line at the grocery store and seen the magazine covers, we know that when it comes to sexuality, and religion is very closely tied to that, there are huge ranges of opinions and beliefs. And so we have to be careful that just because we believe something that may be different from someone else, that we're not marginalizing those individuals we respect. And then you mentioned disciplining equally, and this is something that you read about in the news, how someone is treated differently because of their sexual orientation or maybe even their religious belief. And I think it's important that, once again, that goes back to starting with yourself and recognizing your own perspectives, as Sarah mentioned. We have to realize how we feel, then keep in check why we feel this way, and not put that on our students in our discipline, in our teaching, in our curriculum. We just have to be fair and equal. And so, like Sarah mentioned and I spoke about before, we have to make a conscious effort to do that. It doesn't come naturally. So thanks for sharing. And then John, you spoke about the separation of church and state and how the readings pointed to we can't really, we can teach religion, we just can't preach it. And that's very true. And so the readings say that you don't have to leave religion completely out. So is there really a separation of church and state? Does that exist? Then you spoke to Christianity favoritism. And I think that goes back to Christian dominance, which Matthew mentioned. And just how that religion, and then you spoke about normalcy, which I thought was very interesting and ties into your Christianity favoritism, and how it can be seen even if you just look at our nationally recognized holidays. And that was something that I hadn't really thought about before. But something as simple as that, it does point back to the Christian faith and that Christian dominancy and favoritism. And then you really spoke a lot about homophobia and how it can hinder relationships, and it locks people into these gender-based stereotypes, and how that just, like you said, people don't want to be in a box and categorized. And so when homophobia takes over, it really hinders the relationships that could be had, especially with same-sex individuals. They get nervous, like you said, that maybe she or he likes me and I don't identify as homosexual, so I really should stay away. So I do think that homophobia can influence a lot of things, and in negative ways. So we have to keep that in check. But thanks everyone for sharing.